Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Jaya Radha, Parthasarthi Radha, Parthasarthi Radhe Jaya. Jayo Sita Ram, Jayo Lakshman Hanuman, Sita Ram, Jayo Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Tai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Pravajikacharya Astotra Sadhivangis Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Pravajikacharya Astotra Sadhivangis Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrind Ki Jai. Anand Koti Vaishnav Vrind Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Jagannathpuri Dham Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samved Bhakti Vrind Ki Jai. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Guru and Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Reading from 6th canto, 1st chapter, verse number 39. Katham svidhirate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin nripam. Katham svidhirate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin rinam. Katham svidhirate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin rinam. Anyone wants to repeat? Katham svedhiryate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichit ninam. Katham svedhiryate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin nrinam. Katham svedhiryate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandyaya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin nrinam. Katham svedhiryate danda kim vasya sthanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichin nrinam. Okay. Katham, svit. By which means? Dhiryate is imposed. Danda, punishment. Kim, what? Va, or. Asya, of this. Sthanam, the place. Ipshitam, desirable. Dandya, punishable. Kim, whether. Karina, fruitive actors. Sarve, all. Ahosvit, or whether. Katichit, some. Nrinam, of the human beings. Translation. What is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. One who has the power to punish others should not punish everyone. There are innumerable living entities, the majority of whom are in the spiritual world and are nitya mukta, everlastingly liberated. There is no question of judging these liberated living beings. Only a small fraction of the living entities, perhaps 1/4, are in the material world. And the major portion of the living entities in the material world, 8 million of 8,400,000 forms of life, are lower than human beings. They are not punishable, for under the laws of material nature, they are automatically evolving. Human beings who are advanced in consciousness are responsible, but not all of them are punishable. Those engaged in advanced pious activities are beyond punishment. Only those who engage in sinful activities are punishable. Therefore, the Vishnu Dutas particularly inquired about who is punishable and why Yamraj has been designated to discriminate between who is punishable and who is not. How is one to be judged? What is the basic principle of authority? These are the questions raised by the Vishnu Dutas. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Nama Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhasya Kripa Sindhu Bhavevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Shai Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashati Deshatarine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Shai Bhutale Shrimate Gopal Kishore Swami Tinamine Prabhupadasya Sahityam Ya Prakasharati Charam Kirtan Sadhu Bhagavad Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Sadho Jaya Udire Nashcha Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtaki. Hare Krishna. So we are reading from the 6th canto and the first chapter. The 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is a very important canto. It basically represents the chest of the Lord. So the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is considered as different limbs of the Lord. So the first and second canto are considered as the lotus feet of the Lord. Right? The third and fourth canto are considered as the thighs of the Lord. The fifth canto considered as the navel of the Lord. The sixth canto is considered as the chest of the Lord. The seventh and eighth canto are considered as the arms of the Lord. Right? The ninth canto is considered as the throat of the Lord. The 10th canto is considered as the face, lotus face. 11th as the forehead, and 10th as the head. 11th as the forehead, and 12th as the head of the Lord. So 6th canto is the chest, and the main topic discussed in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is about Poshnam, which means protection offered by the Lord to his devotees. We all know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshashyami masucha. So Krishna is saying that you surrender to me and I will give you all the protection. do not fear, masucha. And Krishna also says, Kanteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranishyati. Krishna is saying that my devotee never perishes. But in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described that Krishna is giving all the protection, but the key point here is that he gives protection to all the devotees, even if they transgress the path of bhakti accidentally. So that is the key point. Even if someone goes away from bhakti, then Krishna accidentally, if someone goes away from bhakti accidentally, then Krishna still gives his protection to that devotee. And that is the main topic of the 6th canto, and the story of Ajamil is a good example of that. And so this chapter, actually, the first chapter, I thought we can do a little bit of a recap of this chapter and see where we are right now. The chapter actually begins with a very amazing question by Parikshit Maharaj. Because Parikshit Maharaj, in the 5th canto, at the end of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he heard the hellish conditions of life, especially the sinful reactions that people can have, which is going to hell. And some of those are all of them are very scary if you read at the end of the 5th canto. So Parikshit Maharaj, at the beginning of the 6th canto, in the 1st chapter, he asks a very, very good question, where he asks Sukdev Goswami, how can someone be saved from the sinful reactions? You can see that Parikshit Maharaj himself is about to die. But he's so compassionate that he's asking the question of how people can be saved after hearing those hellish conditions. And Srila Prabhupada describes in the purport that a Vaishnava is para dukha dukhi. That means a Vaishnava always is concerned about the suffering of others. That is the quality of a Vaishnava. And the more compassion we develop, the more we progress in the path of devotional service, in the path of bhakti. And that is the meter that we have to test always, is like how compassionate we are becoming by coming into Krishna consciousness. And so Parikshit Maharaj is asking that question, how can we be saved? And Srila Prabhupada describes that compassion is very natural to a devotee. He used the word natural. So natural means it's just the nature of a devotee to be compassionate. So if you look at a Vaishnava, is always in service to Krishna. They're always doing devotional service, and they're happy in that devotional service. So for themselves, there is no problem, but they're concerned about the suffering and the problems of others. So then when Vaishnava sees the suffering, then Vaishnavas or devotees, they make plans to remove the suffering of the human society by, like this temple is doing a wonderful job of book distribution and planning for book distribution, planning for prasadam distribution. So things like that a Vaishnava does to spread Krishna consciousness and be more compassionate. So Sukdev Goswami then heard this question, and he started explaining how these sinful reactions can be removed. And he gives three ways of how sinful reactions can be removed. The first one he gave was karmic atonement. He said through karmic atonement, through atoning the sins, you can get rid of all sinful reactions. That is the first way he provides. And sometimes a spiritual master tests his disciple, and this was a test for Parikshit Maharaj, because Parikshit Maharaj was able to figure out that this is not really the best way. And he said, how is it possible that by just atonement, sinful reactions can be removed? There must be a better way, because it does not remove the sinful tendencies of someone from the root. So yes, you can commit sin, and then you atone, and then you again started committing sin, then what's the point of atonement? And a lot of times, even Srila Prabhupada describes that some Christians do that, where they go to the church and they atone on a Saturday or a Sunday, and the next day, from Monday onwards or Sunday onwards, they start committing sins. So the sinful tendencies do not go away. So he was able to catch that. And Sukdev Goswami agreed that yes, that is not the best way of actually removing all the sinful reactions. So the second way that Sukdev Goswami explained to get rid of the sinful reactions is through jnana. He said through knowledge of the self that one can get rid of the sinful reactions. And the jnana of the self, but there is a problem here. Srila Prabhupada describes that problem is that with jnana, one identifies oneself with the Supreme Lord, thinks himself to be the Supreme Lord. So that also is a problem. So in very subtle form, it's a form of ignorance. And because of that, the sinful tendencies still don't go away, even with jnana. Right? So that is described by Sukdev Goswami. And Parikshit Maharaj also, so Sukdev Goswami is basically saying that both the jnana and the karmic atonement are both faulty methods of actually removing all sinful reactions. So then he describes the third way, the best way to remove all sinful reactions, and he's explained the process of bhakti, devotional service, of how with devotional service, by performing devotional service, one can get rid of all sinful reactions. And he explains that rather than competing with the Lord, because there are a lot of people who actually compete with the Lord. They think that why the Lord enjoys, I want to enjoy as well. And rather than competing with the Lord, you serve the Lord. That is the process of bhakti. And there's a beautiful example given by Sukdev Goswami in the first chapter regarding this, where he says that when the sun rays fall and there is a fog, then the fog basically dissipates. It completely removed when the sun rays fall. And you can see that, I mean, in Delhi there's a lot of fog. And you can see that even when a slight sunlight comes, then the fog completely goes away. So he mentions a lot of beautiful things in that. That's actually verse 15. He mentions that. First of all, he says that only a rare person can actually come to bhakti. So it's very rare, and come to the unalloyed devotional service. So he used the word kechit, kevalya, right? And then he also says that it's a very short-lived, like I described, that the fog is very short-lived. Similarly, the sinful reactions just completely removed the moment you start bhakti. So it's not that you become pure devotees and only then sinful reactions are removed. The sinful reactions are removed even when you start your process of bhakti, which is the Vedic sadhana bhakti, as described in the Nectar of Devotion. So when you start that bhakti, the sinful reactions are completely removed. And the process, as actually Sukdev Goswami explains the process of bhakti in the next verse, and he describes that the process is by chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So he explains that by chanting the holy name, that is the process of bhakti, and that with that process we can achieve perfection. And he also describes that by serving the devotees, by serving the pure Vaishnavas, we can achieve perfection. Mahajano yena gathasa panthas. By following in the footsteps of Mahajans and Acharyas, by following our spiritual master, we can achieve perfection and surrender to Lord Krishna. That is the process by which these sinful reactions can be removed. But then bhakti is not just about removing sinful reactions. Bhakti Devi can give much, much more than that. That removal of sinful reactions is just a side product. It's not that important. What is important in bhakti or bhakti yoga or spiritual or devotional service is that we become servants of Krishna, and then we develop our loving relationship with Krishna. That is the main purpose of bhakti, and that's why we do bhakti. And also the pure bhakti is described by Rupa Goswami in Nectar of Devotion. It describes Anya Bhilashita Shunyam Yana Karmadi Anavritam Anukulyana Krishnanu Shilnam Bhaktir Uttama. So he says that the bhakti is not dependent on karma and jnana. So, and you can see these are the two things that even Sukdev Goswami described, that karmic atonement and jnana, those two, that not only they cannot even remove sinful reactions, how can they even give liberation or love of God? So only bhakti can do that, and that's pure devotional service, anyabhilashita shunyam. So Sukdev Goswami actually, based on the question that Parikshit Maharaj asked of how to remove all the sinful reactions, he started describing as an example the story of Ajamil. So many years ago, Ajamil was going to the forest and he was getting flowers and fruits, and his father sent him there, and he saw a prostitute there, and he got attracted to the prostitute, and then he got her home, and then he married her, he left his wife, and then he had 10 kids with the prostitute, and the youngest son of Ajamil he named him Narayan. And I think that is one of the most intelligent things that Ajamil did, is by calling his son Narayan. And he was very attached to Narayan. He was very attached to Narayan. And he would call his name all the time. He would say, Narayan, come here, Narayan, go there, do this, right? He was very attached. And Srila Prabhupada describes that it's the tradition that we have in Hindus and also in other religions that of naming our child on the name of God is very good, because unknowingly we are calling out the names of Lord at home, and that's what happened with Ajamil, and that is described as agyat sukriti, is by unknowingly calling out and the name of the Lord, right? So that is called agyat sukriti. So when we go out for book distribution, for example, we sometimes request people to chant the holy name. So if they take the book or don't take the book, but we can request them to chant the Maha Mantra once. And even when we greet them sometimes, we say Hare Krishna, they respond by Hare Krishna. So it's, in some ways, it's giving them a benefit. That's the Agyat Sukriti. Is one, they are getting the association of devotees, and second, they're able to chant the holy name. And Nectar of Devotion describes that is the start of bhakti process. The whole process of bhakti begins by coming in association of devotees. So that is the Agyat Sukriti that Ajamil had, like he was calling out, focusing on his son, but he was calling Narayan. So Ajamil saw 3 deformed persons, Yamdutas, come, and he got scared when he saw that, and he called out his son Narayan. Right? He called out his son Narayan, and by simply chanting his son's name, Vishnu Dutas came for his protection. Right? So when Vishnu Dutas came, you can see the interesting thing is that they did not care for how he chanted the name, for who he called. He called his son Narayan, but Vishnu Dutas did not care for that. They really wanted to come for him because he chanted the holy name, because the holy name is so powerful. Right? So they came for his protection. And then, right after that, the conversation began between Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas. And Srila Prabhupada describes that Ajamil actually at that point was unconscious. But he could hear the conversation between Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas. So think about it. If we are in that situation and we are hearing the conversation going on at the end of our life, right? between Vishnu Dutas and Yamadutas. So that conversation was going on. And you can see Ajamil in some ways attained perfection by calling out Narayan at the end of his life. This Ante Narayan Smriti, right? So he had that, as Bhagavad Gita describes, that you can, at the end of your life, if you think of Krishna or you utter the name of, holy name of Krishna, then you can go back to Godhead. So he was able to do that, and he attained that perfection. So the conversation is now going on between Vishnu Dutas and Yamadutas, and Yamadutas are basically wondering who the Vishnu Dutas are, right? And they describe, actually, they ask the question, is the order carriers of Yamaduta said, your eyes are just like the petals of lotus flowers. They're describing how Vishnu Dutas look. Dressed in yellow silken garments, decorated with garlands of lotuses, and wearing very attractive helmets on your heads, and earrings on your ears, you all appear fresh and youthful. So your 4 long arms are decorated with bows and quivers of arrows, and with swords, clubs, conch shells, discs, and lotus flowers. Your effulgence has dissipated the darkness of this place with extraordinary illumination. Now, sirs, why are you obstructing us? So Yamadutas are asking this question, and Vishnu Dutas are smiling. They smiled, basically, hearing that question. And they smiled, but then they returned that question back to Yamadutas. And they started asking question to Yamadutas, right? And they asked the question in verse 38, the blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas said, if you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. And they also asked the question that we have for the verse today, what is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? So you can see that it's like a challenging question to Yamadutas by Vishnu Dutas, but they're still respectful. So that is something we learn from that is we can ask challenging questions, but we have to be respectful, and we have to have the austerities of speech when we are asking those challenging questions. So they're asking the challenging questions, and why are they asking those questions to Yamadutas? Because Yamadutas are at an authoritative position. They are at a position where they have to decide who they have to punish, right? And whenever someone is on the authoritative position, they have a particular responsibility. And for example, if we read in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 5th chapter, it's described that one should not be a father, mother, husband, wife, or a spiritual master if they are not helping their disciple, kids, and or husband or wife, and go back to Godhead. So there is a responsibility because they are dependent on them. They are dependent on them. So that is why Yamadutas are asked this question by Vishnu Dutas, what is your process? What is your logic, right? There must be a logic, there must be a criteria of how you decide who to punish, because they are thinking that Ajamil should not be punished, but then Yamadutas are there about to take his soul. So that doesn't look right to them. So they wanted to query, they wanted to have that kind of question. And it's a very valid, very, very valid question to ask the Yamadutas. And also Yamadutas actually represent Yamaraj, right? They are the students of Yamaraj or disciples of Yamaraj. So they have to be in sync with Yamaraj. And being in sync with the master is very important, right? So that means following the instructions of the spiritual master is very important, because that's what we learn from that, is if we are not in sync with our master, then we are going in a totally different direction, right? That will not give us the pure devotional service, the bhakti, as Sukadeva Goswami described in the earlier verses of serving the pure devotees, serving the pure souls. So that's why it's important to follow. So Vishnu Dutas want to know, are really Yamadutas in sync with the Yamaraj or not, right? So they want to know, are they just going off their own and trying to make their own decisions of who should be punished, who should not be punished? Or are they really following a certain process which they can describe to Vishnu Dutas? Now you'll see in the later verses that Vishnu Dutas will hear the description by Yamdutas of what is their process, but that process is good, it's true, but it's still not deep enough for them to understand. Because Yamdutas describe that it's all based on Shastra. Everything is based on Shastra. Everything is based on Vedic knowledge in making their decision of who should be punished and who should not be punished. Then what's the problem with that? Then everything is right. But no, the problem is that is still not the deep enough knowledge. Yes, you can follow the Vedas, follow the scriptures, but we also know that Bhagavad Gita describes in that Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha vedascha sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. That too, Krishna is the compiler of the Vedas and Krishna is the knower of the Vedas. So knowing Vedas means knowing Krishna, right? So, and it's also described in the 4th chapter, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvatah tyakta deham punarjanma neti mameti so Arjuna. So, if you know my transcendental qualities and nature, then you don't have to come back into this material world. You can go back to Godhead. So clearly that concept is not clear to Yamdutas. And Yamdutas are also describing later that they have a lot of witnesses. A lot of people actually, they have a lot of witnesses watching us. And those witnesses he describes as sun, moon, fire, evening, day, night, right? And he also describes, they also describe another witness they have is the super soul. So super soul is also a witness of them to understand. Again, this is all logic, this is all their criteria of deciding who to punish, right? So they're thinking about, so they're describing all these witnesses. But then if super soul is the witness, then how is it possible the super soul does not know? The thing about super soul, very interesting thing about super soul that we have all read in Bhagavad Gita is that especially in the first section of the Bhagavad Gita, in the Karma Yoga, where it is described in Bhagavad Gita that soul desires, right? The soul desires, the super soul sanctions, and the material nature facilitates. So the super soul itself is not doing anything. The super soul Paramatma is not doing anything. Everything is conducted through the material nature. The material nature is acting, and the super soul is just directing it. And also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada describes that super soul of Paramatma does not take part in fulfilling the desires of the living being, but he arranges for their fulfillment by material nature. So Yamadutas are basically describing all of this, and then later on Vishnu Dutas will explain as well. And they are basically saying that Yamadutas are basically saying that anywhere where there is material nature, anywhere there are 3 modes of material nature, that's where we act. That's where we come. So, this whole Krishna consciousness is a science, right? And we can see that, we read that in Bhagavad Gita, that if we come above the modes of the material nature, then we cannot get impacted by the modes of material nature, right? We are above. We have transcended the modes of material nature. And Bhakti actually helps us transcend those modes of material nature. And Yamadutas are saying that they stay where the material nature is, wherever the modes of the material nature is. So clearly, with the process of Bhakti Yoga, with the process of devotional service, we can actually, can never be in contact with Yamadutas or Yamraj, right? Because that Yamadutas are only at the platform of material nature. And that's why we cannot be in contact with them, because if we stay at the transcendental nature of being above the modes of material nature. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada describes few things where he says that the punishment that is given, the major portion of the living entities in the material world, Srila Prabhupada says, 8 million of the 8,400,000 forms of life are lower than human beings. So we all know that 400,000 are human forms, human forms, and 8 million of them are non-human forms or animal life and all that. So it is described that 8 million of them, they are not punishable for under the laws of material nature. They are automatically evolving. So this whole punishment does not apply to them. They are evolving. They're going from one birth to another birth, and then eventually they will attain the human form of life. They are evolving. But the 400,000 human forms, they are responsible. They know what is right or wrong. But animals do not know what is right or wrong. A good example is when I came back to India after a few years, I was driving on the other side of the road. Rather than driving on the left, I was driving on the right side. Even though I've driven many times here, for many, many years I was driving here, but still, after coming back for a few years, after a few years, I was driving on the wrong side. So if someone catches you and you say, okay, I don't know that I have to drive on the left, then that's not right. We need to know what is right or what is wrong, right? Because we are humans, we know what is right or wrong. An animal would not know what is right or wrong. So the whole process of dharma, which is the characteristic, our characteristic, and it starts from the human form of life. The understanding starts from the human form of life. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is saying that there are 8 million of them, they are not punishable because they are evolving. But human beings who are advanced in consciousness are responsible. They are responsible. But not all of them are punishable. Why? Because those engaged in advanced pious activities are beyond punishment. So anyone who is doing bhakti yoga, who is performing devotional service, he is beyond, they are in the advanced side of things and they will not have punishment. Again, based on the fact that they are above, they are doing bhakti yoga, they are above the modes of material nature. They are beyond goodness. And at one place, Srila Prabhupada describes that even the goodness, passion, and ignorance in this world, it's still all problem. So it's not pure goodness. So we have to be doing devotional service to come above those modes of material nature. So only those who engage in sinful activities are punishable. Therefore, the Vishnu Dutas particularly inquired about who is punishable and why Yamraj has discriminate between who is punishable and who is not. So these questions are very valid questions, and further they will describe, the Yamadutas will describe their reasoning, their criteria. And also, I was listening to one of the devotees, and they were describing their different types of punishment also. One type of punishment is like when a father gives punishment to his child, then it's for the benefit of that child, and then other punishment is when you give it to an enemy. So Yamadutas are describing and Vishnu Dutas are inquiring, really what kind of punishment are you doing to the people here, and they wanted to understand. So the whole chapter begins by Parikshit Maharaj asking the question, and then Sukdev Goswami describing the 3 ways of karmic atonement and jnana, and then describing bhakti as a devotional service and following the pure devotees. And then the whole story of Ajamil begins, where it is described as an example of how these sinful reactions are removed by doing bhakti, and you get pure devotional service. And then further, there's conversation happening between Yamadutas and Vishnu Dutas, and Vishnu Dutas are asking that question to Yamadutas of how do you punish, and describing the criteria, and that's how the process begins. And really, from the process of bhakti yoga and the process of devotional service, not just we can get rid of the sinful reactions, but we can develop the pure devotional service to Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So we'll stop here and see if there are any comments or questions. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, you mentioned that the Yamadutas have their jurisdiction within the 3 modes. But one who is doing bhakti, he is above the 3 modes. But what about us who are doing like mixed, and we don't know, of course we are not on that transcendental level yet. So what about us? I mean, do we still fall under the jurisdiction?
No, so one of the things that Sukdev Goswami describes is that example of the sun and the fog. right? Just by a little bit of a rays of sun, the fog completely goes away. So even by doing a little bit of devotional service, we are able to get rid of the sinful reactions. And even though we may not be always above the modes, but we are under the protection of Krishna. We are always under the protection of Krishna, even if we have not developed pure bhakti. So yes, so even in that scenario, Yamadutas cannot have any jurisdiction in that scenario. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Anyone else?
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class. I just want to know that we hear that at the end of the life, when a person gets Ante Narayana Smriti, so he will get liberated. But in the case of Ajamil, we see that he just got a chance, another chance, and get association of the devotees, and then he got liberation. So how can we understand this, that he will get chance or he will directly go to the Dham? So can you please?
I think, thank you, Prabhu, for the question. So I think Rukmani Prabhu gave a class few days ago. He described that this is like a second chance for Ajamil, right? And he described that and I loved that point he made, which is, we already know the story of Ajamil. So to some extent, we know which chance this is for us, like the second chance or the first chance, right? It's the second chance for us, so we know that. And so yeah, Ajamil was not really at the pure level, because he committed some sins, but he also chanted the name of Lord Narayan. So he got a chance to actually, to purify himself. So that's why right after that he went to Haridwar and he purified himself, and then later on the Vishnu Dutas came. So there was no purification at that time, and that's the reason that he had to, actually he didn't die at that time, and then he was able to give another chance. He was able to get another chance to purify himself.
So it means it's very case to case, different cases. I can say
it
that.
Depends on our purification, and it all depends on that. It depends on how we are able to chant the holy name at the end of our life, and what are the activities that we have performed in our life, and how much bhakti we have done. And with that purification, it can decide. But even if as a devotee, as Bhagavad Gita describes, that even if we are not able to go back to Godhead, then we get a chance to back in this material world to either take birth in a Brahman family or an aristocratic family, and be able to continue our process of bhakti from there.
So it means ultimately one will go, but it may take some time.
It is a gradual process, and our purpose, sometimes yes, we talk about going back to Godhead, but what will we do there? What will we do there? We have to serve. So our purpose is to serve, and then we can do some service wherever we are, and whether in the material world or in the spiritual world. But yes, it is a gradual process. It is a gradual process. But we have to be hopeful that yes, by being in association of devotees and by following instructions of our acharyas and spiritual master, we can go back to Godhead.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu at the back.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for wonderful class. My question is that just like in India, India is just like a religious place where the Lords appear. But same thing I'm saying foreign, there's no Lords appear. The commitment of the scene, whose people are just like doing scene in India, and same scene is happening in outside. And both punishment is the same, because this place, both is a different place. Because it's taking birth in India is a pious place.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu, for the question. So you mentioned that India is more religious place than maybe US, right? You mentioned that all Krishna appeared here. But one thing, when you said that when Krishna appeared here, I thought of Srila Prabhupada appeared in US, right? He came to America, and he spread Krishna consciousness. In fact, a lot of people they go from here to US and they come to Krishna consciousness in US, right? So yes, but yes, you're right that India is the place, it's very religious, but the sin is a sin. Any sin committed here or in US or any other country is still the same. So the punishment is pretty much the same, because it's a sin. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned the responsibility of being an Indian and taking birth as an Indian, and so that our responsibility is to spread Krishna consciousness. But to answer your question, there is no difference as such as a sin committed here versus anywhere else. It all depends on what kind of sin that is being committed. But as Sukdev Goswami is describing, by just doing a little bit of devotional service, by just starting the devotional service, we can get rid of the sinful reactions. But we also should not be doing aparadh of chanting the holy name and then committing sins and think that chanting the holy names will actually remove our sins and we continue to do sins. Right? So that is one of the 10 offenses.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. So Prabhuji, in purport, Prabhupada describes about Nitya Mukt, which are residing in the spiritual world, in relation to what kind of people are punishable. So Prabhupada says that there is no question of punishing such people, and majority of population resides there, 3/4 of the population. So when we talk about Nitya Mukt, my question is that Prabhupada also describes elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita that we were all there, and because we have a choice, that choice is never taken away from us. And because that is the basis of love, if there is no choice, that is slavery. Only when there is choice that there can be bhakti. So how do we understand Nitya Mukt? So if there is choice, that will always be, and there is also a term used, Nitya Badh. So is it that we were never there, or that we have actually come from there here? And if somebody is Nitya Mukt, then how can one come back here? So this is my question.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for the question. Actually, someone asked that similar question to His Holiness Janardhan Maharaj a few days ago. And the fact that, yes, it is described that we were there, and then because we wanted to move away from Krishna, because we wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna, that is the reason why we are in this material world. But it is also described by acharyas that we should not worry about how we got here. We should not worry about what happened, how all this process went, and how we got here. But now that we are here, we have the scriptures given to us by Srila Prabhupada. We have wonderful knowledge here that we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. And with that knowledge, we can think about how to go from here to where we want to go. And yes, this whole science of understanding, it's complicated. And we should not, as acharyas describe, we should not get into that much. And think about the present situation of where we are and how we can perform bhakti and perform devotional service to move on and do some service. So, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, Prabhu. You want to take a mic, Prabhu? Hare Krishna.
But what about 2 minutes and liberated? So, what is the process? Maharaj Nimi.
The process of bhakti is, I mean, someone who's at the pure level can go back to Godhead quickly, right? So it all depends on where we are in that process of bhakti. And with that process, we can go back to Godhead. Again, our purpose should be to think about more serving the Lord than to actually always think about going back to Godhead. Even though Srila Prabhupada actually did mention that by chanting the holy name and by following the regulative principles, we can go back to Godhead. But that, it's all based on our intention, it's all based on our process of bhakti that we are following, and with what kind of intention we are coming into bhakti, and with that we can go back to Godhead as well. So.
But Prabhuji, Maharaj Nimi whole life he is just fighting.
Yes, Prabhu. So yeah, it's the process of bhakti is like that. Yes. Yeah. Okay, we'll end here. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare